Hi everyone, welcome to Needles, Thread and Little Betty. My name's Mandy and this is Little Betty. She just woke up, so she's not quite herself yet, are you? Oh, big yawn. Oh, beautiful. Today we're going to be making a quilted Christmas stocking. It's a very simple way of quilting. It's got a lining, a contrast lining, fabric of your own choice, a little tab for hanging up, and basically you can make them in whatever sort of size you want. I guess it depends how good you've been. Shall we get started? To begin with, we need to get everything ready that we're going to be using. That's Christmas fabric for the outside of your stocking and Christmas fabric, a contrast for the lining. We're going to need some wadding for the quilting part, and we'll need the template of the stocking. For the template, all you need is a piece of paper cut out in a stocking shape. The only thing you've got to remember is this will have a seam allowance, so you just need to draw the shape just slightly bigger than what you want it. And like I said, you can go for any size you like, really. Some people find that the smaller the project, sometimes it can get a bit fiddly and a bit harder to sew. So if you've been really good, it should be a lot easier to sew. Once you've got your template, you can then cut out the shapes that you need. I've already cut out the wadding. So you'll need 2 pieces of your stocking shapes made from wadding. This wadding is a 50-50 bamboo cotton mix. It's easy to use, it's not too thick. You don't want it too thick. The thicker you have it, the bulkier it will be, and it'll be harder to put things inside. So yeah, just to cushion it really. I think this is probably around about 3 mil, 4 mil thickness. Doesn't really matter that much, just whatever you want really. Some people don't even quilt when they make stockings, so it's entirely up to you. So you'll need 2 pieces of that. You'll also need 2 pieces of each of your fabrics, so that's your outer layer and your lining, and I'll show you how I'm going to cut those out just now. So I've got the fabric that I want to use. For the outside, I've chosen this nice sort of blue fabric. It's got little robins on, little bits of holly and berries, and some snowflakes in the background. And this will be the outside fabric. It's multi-directional, so it doesn't matter which way up you have this. And all I'm going to do is fold it in half. Get it so it's fairly even in half. And I'm going to get my template, just place the template on top of the 2 halves. Like I said, because it's multi-directional, it doesn't really matter which way up you have your stocking. And I'm just going to pin this in place. Just a few pins just to hold it down for when I cut out the shape. Oops, that one's gonna scoot. That's it, pop it in there. Just a couple around the outside. I'm going to be cutting this out with scissors. You can use a rotary cutter if you want to, but it's entirely up to you. For me, when I'm doing something with curves, I tend to do it with scissors. I know there's probably quite a few people out there that just like to use a rotary cutter and are quite good at getting it round the curves, but I'm not one of them, unfortunately. Okay, and you do that for both pieces of fabric. The only thing you need to remember is if you've got a directional one, which my lining is, if you can see that, there's lots of robins on there, but they're all facing they're all upright. if you've got a directional one, you need to be careful where you place your template. So for instance, if this was the outside fabric, I would have the templates with the top of the stocking here and the bottom of the stocking here. But this one's going to be in the lining. And if you remember from the finished stocking, we've got a piece that folds over the top like a little cuff on the top of the stocking. Now, if you've got that the right way up, with the robbins the right way up, when you fold the bit over at the top, your robbins are going to be upside down. So for this one, I'm going to be cutting out my stocking shapes upside down. So I'll get along and cut those out, and then I'll see you after. So I've cut out all the shapes that I need now. So now I've got the original two that I'd already cut out of the wadding. I've got two of the outer fabric, and I've got my two upside down shapes of my inner fabric. What I've also done, and I've cut it out of my outer fabric, is I've made a strip that we're going to use for the little loop for hanging it up. You don't have to use it out of fabric. You can get some nice fancy sort of silver type or gold or whatever what you want to use. You can get all sorts of different threads and things now. It's up to you, but I've just chose to use the same fabric as the outer of the stocking. Okay, this is, I think it's around 1.5 inches wide and about 10 inches long. You won't need it as long as that. Some of it will be sewn into the lining, but that's just to work with. Okay, so you've got all your pieces. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start quilting, and we're going to be quilting the outer fabric onto the wadding. Okay, so you need to get your two pieces of wadding and place your outer fabric on top of your wadding, just like that, and just give it a couple of pins just to pin it in place, and then I'll show you how we're going to do the quilting. So now we're ready to quilt the stocking, and it's the outside part of the stocking. I've pinned it down ready. So then it's to decide how you're going to quilt it. You can hand quilt it if you want to do. Certainly if you've got a fabric that's got nice sort of little patterns on, you can quilt around the patterns. But I'm going to machine it, and I'm going to machine it with straight diagonal lines one way, then straight diagonal lines the other way, so we've got a crisscross pattern. Okay, because I'm going to do it with straight lines, I need to mark the lines on the fabric first, because if I don't, and I'm just guessing, then you can't guarantee they're going to be straight, and they could be going all over the place. You might as well do squirrels if you're going to do that. So what I'm going to do is, I've got a ruler here, and I've got one of these eraser pens. So I'm going to mark the lines that I want to quilt onto the fabric using this pen and the ruler. Because it's an air eraser pen, that means it will disappear, and sometimes it can disappear quite quickly. So I'm just going to do a few lines first, sew them, and then do the rest of the lines, and that way it won't sort of be disappeared before I complete that side. When you're doing this kind of pattern, so you'll have one side, you'll have all your lines going one way, and then when you crisscross you'll have them going another way. But each direction that your line's going, you need to sew in the same direction. So if you're sewing from, say, right to left, then all the ones in that direction need to be right to left. Okay, if you mix them up, the problem that you can have is it can start to pucker, and it kind of like, it doesn't look as neat. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to draw a couple of lines first using my ruler as a guide. You don't want them too far apart, not when you're quilting. They do say with your wadding you should have, there's kind of like a guidance on how, on kind of like the gaps that you have with your quilting. I mean, it's your preference really, it doesn't matter too much, but the only problem is if you have too big a gaps between your sewing, then it just kind of looks a bit bulky, it doesn't look as messy. The other side of that, if you have them two lines next to each other too much, it kind of flattens out your fabric more. So I guess it depends how sort of cushiony you want it. I can't get my words out again. So I'm going over to the machine. I've just done a couple. I don't want any way to start myself off, so I'm just doing a couple more. You can do the stitches a little bit tighter if you want to. It doesn't really matter at this point. If you're doing block work, kind of like patchwork block work, you tend to do your stitches a little bit tighter to hold it together, so there's less give in it. Doesn't matter so much when you're just doing quilting. Just get my needle in the right place, take one of my pins out. And I don't know if you can see from there, but I've just got a couple of my lines down sewn in already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way to the end of that side, and then I'm going to go and crisscross them back again. Okay, see you in a minute. So I'm on the second lot of lines now, so the crisscross part, and I've just got a few lines left to do. Just drop my foot, normal straight stitch. It's quite quickly, these don't really take that long at all, really. Last couple left. This is why you need to do it quite quickly as well, because the lines that I put on with the air eraser, I can barely see them. And just about make out where they are. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that on there. If I move it with the light, you can see a crisscross type, I can't get my words, crisscross type pattern there. And what you need to do is do that on both sides of the outer stocking, and I've already done that one there, and that's all the quilting that you need to do. So now what we need to do is start to construct the stocking itself, and we're going to do this by starting with the outer fabrics. We're just going to put them together, right sides together. You can pin it round. I've got these little quilting clips that I like to use, and just quilt, not quilt, clip, don't quilt, we've done the quilting, clip all the way around the edges, just a few in, you don't want too many. And then what we're going to do then is we're going to sew all the way around the outside of the shape, leaving the top part open. Okay. I normally, for things like this, for most things with quilting in, or not necessarily quilting but craft projects that's not clothing, I would just do a 1/4 of an inch seam line. So I'll get on and do that. Once you've done that, I'll then speak to you about the inner lining, and we don't quite do that in the same way. Okay, so we're going to do the outside first and then I'll come back to you. Okay. Once you've completed your sewing all the way around, remembering to leave the gap at the top of the stocking, just have a look just to make sure if there's any sort of bits that are a bit too bulky in your seam. You can just sort of trim it off a little bit. You don't want to trim too close to the stitching though, just in case it kind of catches it and comes undone. Sometimes around the heel, I'm just going to trim a little bit off. Use my pinking shears just around the heel. It just makes it, when you're turning it the right way round, it just makes it that little bit smoother. The creases, getting the shape smoother. Okay, so just trim a little bit off. Okay. Sometimes it helps to just trim it off around the way the curve of the stocking. Just a tiny bit. Okay, that's fine. And then you can turn it all the way around. Right side. Just poke your fingers through just gently, just to make sure you've got that curve. And that's the outer part of the stocking done. Okay, what we could do at this stage is just make the loop, because we're going to be making the lining, and when we attach the lining to the outer stocking, we'll need to sandwich this in. So remember the strip, it's about 1.5 inches wide, about 10 inches long. Just fold that in half along the long side, and you just want to just sew down the raw edge seam, probably about 1/4 of an inch, something like that. Nothing, you don't want it too big down there, because you've got to turn it the right way round. And what I'll do is I'll just sew a little bit across the top as well. It just makes it easier for turning it round. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. Got a little bit of fluff on my needle from the wadding. Any bits of fluff like that, just sort of poke them off. Okay. So a nice straight edge. Remember, you don't want this tab too thick, because it is just a loop for hanging the stocking up. I'm just going to do a little bit to that side, a little bit across. And then what you need to do then is just turn it the right side out. If you have sewn if you have got quite a thickish seam, you could just trim that down as well, just make it a little bit easier. I mean, mine's quite thin. It's 1/4 of an inch, just under 1/4 of an inch, so I probably don't need to. Where I've sewn across the top bit there, I might just clip that to an angle, making sure not to cut through the stitches that are outlining your loop. It just makes it a little bit, you get a bit of a better point when you turn it the right way around. It won't actually matter too much for this because that will be buried in the lining, but it just makes it neater when you turn it around and less bulky. Okay, so I've got this little, I'm just going to fetch it now. That's the thing with doing these videos. When I decided I was going to start doing a channel, doing tutorials and just chatting and that, I wanted the videos to be very sort of natural and non-scripted. So I kind of plan in my head what I'm going to talk to you about, because I'm doing the project, but none of it's scripted, as you can probably tell. I just wanted it to be quite natural so you could get to sort of see more about what I'm really like as well, really. There's nothing where sometimes you see these tutorials and they're all very scripted, and the people, you can't really relate to the people, can you? So I like it to be a bit more natural and a bit more me. Hence me not having this tool ready. So basically this tool, it's a turning tool. I don't use it that often and I always get it's a bit fiddly. So you've got, that's like a hollow tube. I'm going to push that inside the loop that I'm making. And there's this like thinner bit. So you've got your hollow tube in there. The top's at the top, where the top of the tube is at the top where I've sewn across. And then with this thinner bit, you just poke that down and hopefully it should poke it through. It's a little bit, I can't really see it. You can't really see it that well on the video. So you just poke it through, and what it eventually does, whoop, loops just fell down. You get that the right way round. Just use my little rod to poke that bit out, and there you've got your loop. You can tell it's not scripted because the bottom bit's just shot across the floor. But anyway, doesn't matter because we've got our loop. As I said in my last video, doesn't matter how you get there as long as you're happy with the results. Okay, so that's ready. I will give that a bit of a press before I put it in, but that's ready now. And so what we're going to do is go to the lining. So I've got my 2 pieces of fabric, and if you remember, we cut these upside down. Okay, and just going to pin those together the same way as I did with the outer stocking. Pin or clip them together. I'll clip them, and we're going to sew around this. But what we need to do with this one is we need to leave about a 2-inch gap somewhere along. I usually leave it along the bottom bit, so we need to leave a 2-inch gap so that when we attach it to the outer stocking we can pull it through. And when it comes to doing that, obviously I'll show you what I'm going to do, but for now what you need to remember is to sew all the way around leaving the top of the stocking open again. So all the way up this side, wherever it is that you're leaving the gap, I leave it in the bottom, about a 2-inch gap there, and then leave the hole, and then sew again all the way back round right up to the top of your stocking. Okay, so I'm going to do that and I'll see you in a moment. I've sewn the lining fabric all the way around the outside, leaving a gap at the top of the stocking and also leaving a gap. There's about 2, maybe 2.5 inches just in the bottom. So what we need to do now is put the lining inside the stocking. To do that, we leave the lining inside out and we put the outer stocking, the quilted part, inside the lining. Okay, so just stuff it all in. Make sure that the toes of the stocking, if you like, are facing the right direction, the heels in the right place, and just push it in so that the right sides of both fabrics are together. Okay, just a little bit of manoeuvring around. If you hear some funny noises in the background, I've got 2 little dogs playing on the floor in here, little Betty and her older sister, if you like, Hilda. You won't see a lot of Hilda because she doesn't like a lot of fuss. She's a bit older than Betty, but at the moment she's actually playing with her. So once it's sort of tucked nice and neatly inside, match up your seams, your side seams, and then we want to add our loop. I've already given that a bit of a press. So what we need to do is put this between the 2 layers, so between the outer fabric and the lining. Just tuck it down, sort of determine how large you want the loop, but just tuck it down out the way along the back seam and bring the 2 ends up. It can come up just above the raw edges of the 2 fabrics together, because we can snip that bit off, but just make sure it's straight down and it's along that back seam. Okay, once you've got that in place, you can clip or pin it together. I'm just going to put a clip on there. Clip the front seams together. You can, for some projects, these seams you can iron out flat if you want to. It's not that important for this project as such. If it was something else, then I'd suggest just ironing them flat. But you've already got your wadding and that is a little bit bulky, so it doesn't matter that much, and your seams aren't that big anyway. But just put a couple of clips round. Then what we're going to do is we're going to sew all the way around this, the top of the stocking, so all the way around, and you want a good 1/4 inch seam allowance around the top of that. Okay, with my machine, because I've got this table on, what I'm going to do is just remove the table out of the way, and then I can slip this over that part of the machine, and then it just sort of holds it in place while I sew it. So I'm going to give that a little sew. Put my needle in, just trying to keep it as the sewing edge on the seam as straight as possible, otherwise you're going to end up with a bit of a wonky top. Okay, I'm just going to sew all the way around. because there's clips in and they're a little bit bulkier than pins, you just have to manoeuvre them a little bit this way. Making sure you've got all your layers together. It's quite thick at this point because you've got your wadding and you've got your outer layer and your inner layer, and also when you come to the back you've got that little bit of the loop as well. So just bear in mind. I just ease it round with I keep a couple of my fingers inside the stocking. Just help, not pulling on it because you don't want to pull on the machine, but it just helps ease it round because you've got a smaller gap that goes around this part of your machine. If you were doing a smaller stocking with a smaller gap, you'd have to just sort of manipulate it around, because I'm guessing a smaller stocking wouldn't fit over this part. This is just perfect size actually. When you get to the other side of your stitching, when you meet up, just a couple of back stitches to help hold it in place. And then you've got that sewn all the way around the top. So I'm just going to snip off that little bit of the loop that's sticking up. And also at this point, you can just trim any edges. When you're quilting, and certainly machine quilting, as I was saying earlier, the closer the stitches are, the sort of the flatter it makes the piece of work that you're doing, and it kind of spreads out the wadding. So sometimes when you're quilting, you'll get little bits of wadding that come past the fabric. That's fine, just snip it off. I'm just using my pinking shears to just trim it up a little bit. I like the pinking shears because it helps as well with the turning over. Just helps that seam sit a bit nicer sometimes, especially around corners. So don't want to go too close to the stitching. So that's that part done. So what we're going to do now is what's called bagging out, and if you do make bags you'll know what I mean. So remember the gap that we left at the bottom. We're just going to gently ease out the quilted part of the stocking out through that gap, and what you'll end up with is one long double piece like that. Okay, just push your little bits of toes and heels out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to close this gap up. So you just want to push the raw edges on the inside. You're not going to see this, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be terribly neat. You just have to make sure the gap's closed. So just push your seams inside. I'm going to give it a little bit of spray. That just helps me finger press that down. If you saw my last video where I was making the Christmas table runner, you can see that I use this. This is called Best Press Spray. It's basically a starch spray that just sort of helps if you're finger pressing or even helps when you're just pressing it. It just helps the fabric just feel that little bit stiffer while you're working with it, which makes it easier to wear. And you can get all sorts of starch sprays. I like the smell of this one, that's why I've got this one. But that's just sort of finger press that down, and then I'm just going to sew over close to the edge and sew that gap shut. Like I say, you're not going to see this part at all, so it doesn't really have to be terribly neat, or it just basically the gap just needs to be closed. Just close to the edge, making sure that all the raw edges are tucked inside. And that gap's nice and closed. So what I'm going to do now is push this lining inside the stocking. Push it all the way down. A little bit of a thread sticking out there. Get rid of that. And so that the toes meet and the heel meets all the way around the curves. Okay. And even at this point, we've got a finished stocking. But you could leave it like that if you wanted to. But what I'm going to do, what I did with the other one, is I want a nice neat edge that's folded over. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to manipulate this top part down so it's neat, and then I'm going to iron it flat, and then we're going to top stitch all the way around the top, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. I'll just go over to the iron. So I've just ironed the top of my stocking all the way around, so I've got a nice neat edge. The loop is in there nice, got a nice loop there. It's a bit longer at the minute, but when I turn the cuff over, it kind of comes back on itself, so don't worry about it being too long at this stage. Okay, so first of all I'm going to top stitch, and to top stitch I'm just going to do a row of stitching all the way round the top of the stocking, close to the edge, not right on the edge, just close to the edge. And we'll do this nice and slow to keep it as neat as possible. Sometimes it's quite hard to keep it quite neat and straight. Okay, so I'm going to top stitch all the way around the edge, and what that'll do, that just helps keep that nice and straight at the top. So back on my machine, doesn't really matter where you start. The main thing is just lining it up so it's quite near the edge, and we're just going to go nice and slow. I've got a foot pedal which I use with this machine, but I can use it without a foot pedal. It might actually be easier to do it without the foot pedal, I don't know, but I'm just so used to using it, I just always use the foot pedal. I have got a knee lift as well, but let's not talk about that at the minute. Okay, so nice and slow. We've made a really good job so far. We don't want to sort of rush this bit and it take away some of the nice finish that we've already got. If you're very skilled at keeping it nice and straight, you could do this in a contrast stitch if you want, contrast colour thread if you wanted. If you were doing sort of like top stitching around pockets and things like that, it's quite nice to do that in a contrast stitch. It's not that necessary for this project. If you did your quilting in a different colour that stood out, you could probably do this top stitch in the same colour. Almost there to the edge. And just back to where you started from. A couple of little bits to threads to snip off. This machine snips off as it finishes, but when you start, you've always got a tiny little bit that you start with, so I just snip that bit off. And I don't know if you can see that, a really nice neat top stitch around the edge. Okay, nearly finished. So we just turn over the top part of the stocking, the cuff if you like. Remember when I said you needed your inside fabric, if it's got a directional pattern on it, upside down, you can see two little robins the right way up on the side, so that's why we do it. Okay, and two little robins at the back, although they're quite joined together. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is this loop now, because we don't want it hanging down. We've got it the way we want it. You can tack that down in place if you want to, but you don't need to, because when you attach this loop, because what we're going to do with the loop is just upwards like that. I'm going to clip that in place, and we're just going to attach that loop there. All we're going to do is do a couple of stitches across the top. I'll probably do that without touching it, and that'll help hold the cuff in place anyway. So if you want to do a bit of tacking, that's up to you. You can, but you don't need to. Just under the machine, make sure your loop's nice and straight on top of each other. Couple of backward stitches as well. And he's done. And there we have it, your Christmas stocking. It's lovely, nice and quilted, get some goodies in there. And now I've got a matching pair. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've enjoyed making it. I like to make all the nice Christmas things. I like to make things anyway all throughout the year, as you'll probably find out if you keep watching. If you have enjoyed it, please subscribe and press the alert button if you want to know when I'm going to be posting more videos, tutorials. I will be doing another one in a couple of weeks. Not quite made my mind up what I'm doing yet, but it will be along the Christmas theme. Okay, so I'll leave you to it. Happy sewing. Bye.